Now, everyone has their own preferences when they play Genshin, like what characters they like or what weapon feels the best for them, but I think one of the main things that a lot of players are sort of biased to is what their favorite element is. Like, you've seen these people in the co-op menu with their bio saying something like Anemo Supremacy or Hydro Supremacy, but I kind of sat down and wondered, why? Now, I would have come out with this video earlier, but I've been doing some secret research in public Discord servers and Genshin co-op and asked 100 people what their favorite element is. So in this video, I'll be going over the pros and cons of every single element and maybe changing your mind and swapping to another element supremacy. Alright, the first element is Anemo. Now, I'm just gonna say it now, throughout my research and just from all my friends, Anemo by far was the favorite element for most people. I mean, I can't really disagree, even though I'm not Anemo Supremacy, I do think that it's a very good element and one that should be on every single team. Anemo just has a lot of support abilities like 4-piece VV to reduce enemies' elemental resistance, increasing movement, and well, mainly grouping enemies to hit them all at once. But the weird thing is, the reasoning for most of the Anemo Supremacy people that I've encountered was just because they like the characters. I mean, a lot of Anemo characters have a really good looking character design, but if I'm just gonna go off what the people said, most of them didn't even say they liked the element as much as they said they liked Venti, Kazuha, Xiao, etc. But thankfully, the few people that did give me a reason was mainly because of the grouping and not much else. I would personally say that Anemo by far is the most useful element because of what I said earlier, grouping, lowering enemies' elemental resistance, movement, yada yada. Next up though is Cryo, which surprisingly didn't get as many votes as I would have thought. I just assumed for some reason that Cryo would be at a pretty close second, but it's actually not even that close. Now, Cryo as an element is pretty useful, but only really has one practical team comp, which is Freeze. Now, there are melt comps like Ayaka and Zhongling, but they're not as popular as some vaporized teams like the national team and generally require a 5-star character. Now, Cryo as an element actually does have some of the strongest characters in the game like Ayaka and Eula, even though Eula is not even really Cryo. But back to Freeze. It's one of the strongest team comps in the game because it basically turns all the enemies into statues and lets you deal a shit ton of damage without getting hit at all. The bad thing about Freeze and mainly the Blizzard Strayer set is that if you're fighting an enemy or a boss that can't be frozen, it's kinda useless. But let's talk about a Ayaka melt comp. I mean, I know that it's not the most practical because having Bennett, Zhongling, and Sucrose on another team would just open up Ayaka for Freeze and then boom, you have 2 team comps. But having fun on my friend's account, Melt Ayaka actually does do a shit ton of damage while being pretty fun. There's also Melt Ganyu, sort of accomplishing the same exact thing, but again, like, I think she would be better on a Freeze team. But moving on to Electro. Now, it did get a little less votes than Cryo, but I still think it's one of the better elements. Let me explain. Now, Electro sort of does have reactions and such, but none of them actually increase the damage of Electro at all. Like, for example, if you hit Pyro with Cryo, it would increase the cryo damage by 1.5 times, but Electro doesn't have any of that. It does have a couple reactions like Super Conduct, which decreases enemies' physical resistance by 40%, and Electro Charge, which just deals Electro damage over time and spreads to other enemies that are wet. But like I said earlier, none of them actually increase the Electro damage at all, so running teams with like 2 or 3 Electro characters isn't out of the blue. In my opinion, I put Electro in the same boat as Anemo and Geo because it really is sort of just a neutral element that's more utility rather than damage dealing. But aside from that, one of the most popular team comps in the game is actually a Taser team, which has either 1 or 2 Electro characters off field, while another character like Child or Xingqiu applies Hydro and spreads Electro to every enemy on the field. The only downside to this team is that the damage kind of falls off if you're only fighting one enemy, but it is one of the best teams when fighting hordes of enemies. But to end Electro, Mommy. Alright, so personally, I do like Geo, but I don't really have many Geo characters. When I went through other Genshin worlds though, you might be as surprised as I am to see Geo ranked way lower than all the other elements. But I don't think the reasoning about that is because of the element at all. It's just like there's only really like 3 good Geo characters, while all the other ones are ones that not many people play and ones that aren't talked about as much. I mean, if I'm gonna be honest, when Ito came out a couple months ago, he kinda revived Geo because he was really the first Geo main DPS character. There's also Zhongli though, having the best shield in the game, literally making it so you don't have to dodge, and Albedo being a really good sub DPS and support for the other members in your party. I mean, there's also Ningguang, who's kind of mommy, but gotta say, like, she's not really that exciting. But if we're going off the title of the video, then Geo as an element isn't really that good, except for the Elemental Resonance being one of the stronger ones, increasing shield strength by 15%, while also increasing damage dealt by 15%, and decreasing enemies' Geo resistance by 20% when protected by a shield. Overall though, Geo is a utility element mainly for supporting the other members in your party, but as an element on its own, it wouldn't be very high up this list. Alright, now we're on to Hydro, my personal favorite element, but a quick note, Because I'm saying that's my favorite element, I'm going to be a tiny little bit biased towards it, so keep that in mind. First off, reactions. Now, we all know that one of the best teams in the game is a national team with Xingqiu, Bennett, Zhongling, and Sucrose. Now, Zhongling on this team is just as important as Xingqiu, but basically the Hydro Pyro Vaporize reaction is one of the best reactions in the game because of how easy it is to play and build. But Vaporize isn't the only good reaction with Hydro. There's also Freeze and Electro Charge for a Taser team, which I already talked about earlier. Now, of course, Hydro on its own can't make those reactions and depend on the other elements to be dealing extra damage, but when it comes to the base element of a lot of reactions, Hydro's at the center of most of them. Like, generally, it's the Hydro sort of enabling that to happen. Like, for Vaporized teams, the Pyro needs to hit the Hydro, and it doesn't matter so much for Cryo and Electro, but you get the point. I personally also think that Hydro has some of the coolest characters in the game, like a Fatui Harbinger who can change his weapon from a bow to a sword, the head of the Kamisato clan, and the divine priestess of Watatsumi Island. It does kinda suck though that you only really have a choice between sword, bow, or catalyst, but I think that Hydro is one of the more useful elements. Alright, now we're on to Pyro, which surprisingly plays second on what element everyone liked the most. Now, I gotta say that some of the best characters in the game are Pyro. We got Hu Tao, Bennett, Zhongling, Klee. Oh wait, I think that might have been a mistype. But anyway, there's a lot of good Pyro characters in the game, but we're talking about the element here. The only two viable reactions are Vaporize and Melt. I mean, there's Overloaded, but not many viable teams center around Overloaded. I mean, one that you can actually use. But apart from reaction teams, there are mono Pyro teams that are actually pretty good. Something like Diluc, Bennett, Zhongling, and Kazuha actually isn't that bad of a team. But wait, there's one more reaction that Pyro can do that no other element can. Burning. Now, I don't really know any of the Dendro reactions as of this moment, so I can't really comment on them. This is a complete lie, I'm just saying it so I don't get copyrighted. But what I know from killing these Dendro slimes is that the burning reaction is probably going to be pretty cool. All in all though, Pyro is one of the stronger elements and ranks itself very high in the element list, which I think is pretty deserved. Alright, perfect segue to our next element. Dendro's reaction with all the other elements are sick. First there's Bird. Alright, to answer the title of the video, what is the best element in Genshin Impact? And the answer is none. They all do different things and have different reactions. I also can't say that Hydro is the best because of Vaporize, because then that would mean Pyro is also the best because of Vaporize. Oh, but it won't do as much damage unless you use VV and swirl it with Anemo. See what I'm getting at? It's fine to be an element supremacy like me, but at the end of the day, you're not running a whole ass team with one fucking element. Like, that just won't happen. I mean, unless you're like me and, you know, that dedicated, but you know, it's fine. Well, thanks for watching, I really appreciate it. A sub to the channel is free and makes me feel really good about my 4-digit number. Also, I did make a Discord, so if you want to join that and maybe chat sometime, that'll be in the description as well. I'm also going to probably be streaming when Sumeru comes out because as of right now, there's really nothing to do, so I'll probably talk about it a little more on my server whenever the time comes. Well, yeah, that's about it, so see ya. That's about it, so see ya. Alright, the video's done. Now I can start the actual video. So the reason why Hydro is the best element and all the elements are dog is because